Let's talk about the Fox Experiment, a dice drafting, engine building game about breeding foxes. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we are going to talk about the Fox Experiment from Pandasaurus Games. This is the latest game designed by Elizabeth Hargraves, and her games are all, scientifically accurate games that involve animals in some way. Wingspan, I think, was one of the most recent games that I played by Elizabeth Hargraves. But this one is about some experiments that were done in Russia in the 1950s where they were trying to domesticate foxes the same way that wolves were domesticated into dogs. So here is the box for the Fox Experiment, which I think as I'm recording this is available for pre-order from Pandasaurus Games. This is a game for between 1 and 4 players. Now it says on the box age 14 and up. I think 12-year-olds can get behind this one, can understand this one, but it is kind of a strategic game, and games play in only about an hour. Let's take a deeper look at the Fox Experiment from Pandasaurus Games. The Fox Experiment is a game that's medium in terms of its complexity. It is strategic. It's not that complicated once you play a round or two of the game. I think you'll be able to figure it out. Our players found like the symbols on the dice and the symbols on the tokens to be the most complicated thing that we were talking about here. So it's medium in terms of its complexity. What you're trying to do, how you win this game, is you're trying to earn the most victory points after 5 rounds. And they've got a clever round tracker right here on the central board. How do you earn those points? Well, one of the things you're trying to do is breed the friendliest foxes. You're doing some studies. There are some study cards here, a whole deck of these things in the middle of the table, and you're trying to breed foxes that satisfy certain conditions. That's going to earn you some victory points at the end. There are patrons here on the side, and if you're working with patrons, they're going to give you victory points. For example, you're going to get 1 victory point if you work with this patron, 1 victory point for each of these little barking symbols that you have on your player board at the end of the game. So these are end of game bonuses that you can earn. And as I said, you're going to try to breed the friendliest foxes, and you'll earn victory points if you manage to get a fox in, if you win the friendliest fox award each round. Finally, you'll earn some victory points by upgrading your engine here. That each player is going to have a player board like this one. I've pulled out the red player board and the red foxes, but I think all the player boards are the same. And you can upgrade your board in different ways. You can breed more foxes. You can work on more research studies. You can get some extra wild dice that you can roll because you want to get some good symbols coming up on your die rolls, and these ones are wild. And then finally, these are the patrons. So for each time you fill up one of these spots, you get to work with another patron. One of the things that I really liked about this game that was completely unnecessary, I mean, all the players are going to have these little fox meeples that they'll be placing around the board. For example, you place one of your meeples here if your fox happens to be the friendliest fox. But the players will have foxes in their own color, but for no reason other than it's fun to do it that way. There's multiple different sculpts, so there are several different kinds of foxes that you can put on the board. They don't mean anything, these different sculpts. It's just something that I think they added to the game to make it fun. How are you breeding these foxes? How are you earning these victory points? Well, there is a drafting portion of the game. So the first phase of every game is the selection phase, and you're going to go in turn order. Initially, you're just deciding turn order by, any random method. The last person who saw a fox maybe is going to go first, and you go clockwise from there. On your turn, you get those 3 actions. You can draft a male fox, you can draft a female fox, or you can place your little cog on the turn order board. And they do have a mechanism that I like in these kinds of games where if you take your turn later, you're going to get some extra bonuses. But if you want to go first, your bonuses are generally not going to be as good. The bonuses will change every round. So at the end of the round, when you're doing cleanup, you're going to replace these little octagons here with new ones. There's quite a tall stack. I only pulled out a few just to show you what the board's going to look like. But you'll discard these old ones, and then new ones will come up in their place. So there'll be different bonuses all the time. The very first space here on the board is one where there will never be any bonuses. So if you really want to guarantee that you go first, you're not going to get any extra resources for doing that. There are a lot of different symbols on the board, a lot of different symbols in this game. And the bonuses up here that you can get on this round for turn order is that you may be able to draw some science cards. Now, the science cards, there's this little deck of cards down here, and they give you some one-time use ability. By discarding this card, you'll get some power. You might be able to fill in an extra space on the fox that you're breeding, for example, or you might be able to upgrade your engine in some different way that normally you wouldn't be able to do. All of these cards have a little scientific fact about the experiments or about fox genetics. And then up at the top, they give you information about what ability you'll be able to gain by playing the card. So it's a one-time use power that you'll get from grabbing those science cards. Now, if you don't play them, if you just hang on to them, sometimes in the last round, you'll get some cards that aren't going to do anything for you, but they are worth a victory point if you don't play them. So if you hang on to them, you'll get an extra point at the end of the game. These other symbols, you'll see some green squares with half a star on them, and those will allow you to grab one of these tokens. You get these tokens as well if you have the friendliest fox. But this is a token that you can turn in or discard to create an extra die face when you're rolling dice for breeding foxes. So this is like a wild card. It goes with those wild dice, the green wild dice that you can get by upgrading your engine. Everyone's going to start with one of these studies, and as I said, if you upgrade your engine, you can grab some more, and these are great ways to earn some points, and you're earning those points by breeding foxes that have these symbols on them. And as you complete those studies, I'll just put them right here so you can see. As you complete those studies, so if I create a fox that has one purple space, one brown space, and one blue space filled in on his card, my little fox is going to go right there. That's going to give me 2 victory points at the end of the game. But later on, I might be able to fill in more spaces when I'm breeding those foxes, and maybe I'll get to move it over and earn 5 points, or complete the study and earn 10 points. So once I've earned those 10, I can't do anything else with that particular study. I'm probably going to want to draw a second one so that I can start working on that instead. So you're drafting this male, these are the parents. You're drafting the male and the female fox during that first selection phase. And really what you're drafting, though, they are the parents, of course, but you're drafting dice. So by drafting these 2 parents, I'm going to be able to roll 3 blue dice and 1 brown one. And the die faces are what will allow me to create a baby fox, a pup, that has some characteristics. Maybe the characteristics that fulfill the study, or maybe they're going to earn me some tokens that will allow me to start upgrading my engine. Once you've done those 3 actions in the selection phase, you do get a chance to upgrade your engine if you happen to have any little round tokens that you can put on there. We'll talk about that at the end of the next phase. But then you're going to do the breeding phase. So each player is going to have a deck of these cards that have baby foxes on the front. So here's your pup that you're creating. So in this case, you just draw it off the top at random. So I'm going to get a male fox here, and then I'm going to roll those dice. Like I said, I get to roll 2 brown dice and a blue, plus I've got 1 wild dice that I can roll. And if my engine were upgraded, I could grab some extra wild dice as well. Once you've rolled those dice, you're sort of organizing them by color, and then you're trying to complete as many of these symbols on the dice as possible. So here I've got 2 symbols once I've put them all together, and a half, but I could add my extra wild die there, or if I had one of those special tokens, I could use that instead to create that third picture. There's no point of using one of those discardable tiles in this case, because I don't have any other halves that I can fill in. So unless I wanted to come up here and maybe fill in a different color, and perhaps I do. Now I've got 1 brown and 1 blue. Maybe I want to use these 2 wilds to fill in a purple space on my baby fox, and that's going to allow me to complete the study in the next phase of the game. Now, one of the other neat things about these cards is that they're wipe-off cards. So everybody has a dry erase marker, and once you've rolled your dice, you're going to X off some of these symbols on this little puppy so that you know what traits they've inherited from their parents. And here's my fox, Snowball. There's even a space where you can name them if you want to. So Snowball is this one's name because he's white. So I filled in these 4 symbols here on this card. That means that my friendliness score is 4. The player who breeds the fox with the highest friendliness is going to win the friendliness award for that round, and that's going to be worth some victory points and one of those extra wild die squares or 2 later on in the game. Another thing that I'll gain from Snowball over here is that because I filled in 2 spaces on that blue row of symbols, the circle means I get to take one of these little round tokens that matches the color. This is barking. So if I've bred a fox that barks or whines in response to humans, so if I collect a couple of these matching barking symbols, that's what's going to allow me to upgrade my engine. So you can see that there are numbers here on the player board. You might be able to see this on the little camera. So if I have 2 matching symbols, I can put one of them on here and discard the other, and now I can breed 2 foxes in the next round. Eventually, it's going to take 5 matching symbols in order to upgrade. You're going to get some extra victory points, but that might give you the win in the game. If I just go up this far, I'm going to have some extra dice that I can roll, plus some victory points as well. The third time I work with a patron, it's going to cost me 5 of those matching symbols. And you will be able to earn more of those symbols in later rounds of the game. How do you do that? Well, what's going to happen at the end of all this? Once everybody's done their studies, they've collected their tokens, they've found, okay, I have a fox that matches. You've decided who the friendliest fox is. Maybe you've upgraded your board again if you have a chance to do that. Well, you're going to discard all the parents that were in the kennel before, and now the pups go in the kennel instead. So instead of having 1 or 2 or 3 dice, well, in this case now, this fox is going to allow the player who drafts it to roll 3 dice instead of 2 or 1. But eventually you're going to have such a pile of dice that these things are all going to be filled up. And if somebody drafts your fox, they're going to be able to roll a big handful of dice. And that's what you'll find towards the end of the game. You're rolling 8 or 9 or just a huge handful of dice that will create some very friendly foxes. Now, taking your pups and moving them into the kennel means that in the next round, other players might draft the fox that you created. So you might make this great fox that's super friendly that won the friendliness award, but then another player's going first and they're going to be able to draft that fox that gives them maybe more dice than the other ones would. You might be able to see, right? Because like I said, each player has their own deck of these wipe off fox pup cards. So there is a little color symbol in the corner that tells you what player that fox came from. And if, eventually I was breeding 2 or 3 foxes, I might have a male and a female in the kennel next time. You don't want to breed siblings because then you lose some traits at the end of the round if you happen to choose, if you draft a male and a female fox that came from the same player in the previous round. And play continues that way for 5 rounds. So once you've discarded all the foxes in the kennel and you've replaced them with the pups that you bred earlier on, you're going to discard all of these symbols up here in the turn order row and replace them with new ones. You grab those cogs that you had placed and then you hand out, okay, well, I placed my cog in the area that's going to allow me to go first next round, but you've got second and third and fourth symbols as well. So it does make it easy to keep track of who's going in what order. Then in the final round, you're going to give that final friendliness award, and then you start counting up all of the points. You do get some points if you have leftover resources that you couldn't spend. Once your engine is upgraded and you need 5 matching ones, it's pretty hard to get all 5. So you might have some leftovers. You get 1 victory point for every 2 of these that are left over. You get a victory point, like I said, for each of those science cards that you didn't spend during the game. You'll add up the victory points from your patrons, some victory points from your player board if you've upgraded it, and then the player with the most points is going to be the winner. Now, what skills are you practicing when you play a game like the Fox Experiment? Well, this is a game where you do have to do some planning. There's some luck involved because you're rolling dice. So you are, of course, thinking about probability, but you're trying to be efficient in your turns and maximize the benefits of those turns. So you're creating those patterns with the faces on the dice, and maybe you're trying to get some symbols that will allow you to upgrade. Breeding a fox that has a couple of those blue circles filled in would be helpful if you're trying to do a study that requires that, or if you need some matching blue pips so that you can put those on your player board. So you're thinking about the probability. We spent a lot of time at the beginning upgrading the wild dice so that we'd have some extra dice that we could roll. But it really is a game where, because you need to plan ahead and be efficient in your turns and be organized in the way that you're tackling things and think to the fifth round, how you're going to earn and maximize the number of points you're getting. Well, we are talking about a game that exercises the executive functioning skills, the skills and behaviors that you need to work towards a goal. There is a bonus here, though, in that you also get the factual information about these foxes that they were trying to domesticate. There's lots of little factual tidbits in the rules about, why this mechanic is done in this certain way and how it lines up with the experiments that were being done at the time. One of the things that I learned, well, I didn't even know that Russians were trying to domesticate foxes. This was an interesting experiment to me, so I didn't even know that the experiment was being done. But there was government pushback here, so they weren't really allowed. Like, genetics wasn't something that scientists were allowed to talk about in Russia at that time. And so here they are doing these genetic experiments with these foxes in order to domesticate them, but they weren't really allowed to do that. So I'm talking to my son about this as we're getting ready to play the game, and he was like, "Oh wow, you're getting in trouble for your belief in some scientific area of knowledge like Galileo did." And so he's thinking about Galileo because he knew about what happened to him from his science classes. But this was in the 1950s, so in the scheme of things, really not that long ago when you think about it. So it generated an interesting discussion. So there's some scientific facts here and some historical facts that you might be thinking about or talking about as you play the game, and I think that's a great bonus. Final thoughts about the Fox experiment. Well, this is a game where it's an interesting theme. It is an interesting theme, and it's thematic too. Because as you're rolling those dice, you're kind of randomly generating the traits that a pup is going to inherit from its parents. So it is quite thematic in the way that you're doing it, and choosing the two parents and seeing what kinds of pups you're able to breed from those parents is something that, as I say, it is very thematic. Like most Hargrave games, I would say, there's a scientific basis, and the theme really shines through. The components are great, and there was no reason for them to do multiple different fox sculpts for those meeples, but they did anyway, just because it's fun, and I love that. The wipe off boards are a great idea too. There's a scoring board that's a wipe off board as well, so that at the end of the game you're writing everything down, but then you can erase it and reuse it again. So I think that's great too. I've never played a game that used wipe off cards like this, though. I've had other wipe off boards, but never a deck of cards that you would be writing on. The fact that they left a space for you to name those pups was fun too. It was fun at the end of the turn while everybody's kind of dividing up those traits to name the fox that you've bred earlier in the round. Are there downsides, though, to the fox experiment? Well, there were a few things that in our playthroughs we had some concerns about. One is that I think this is a game that plays better with 3 or 4 people. There is a solo game, and you can play it at 2 players, but when you're playing with 2 players, there is a third AI player. So you're not really playing a 2-player game. There's an extra bit of solo mode that's mixed in there when you're playing with 2 players, which makes sense because it's a drafting game, and drafting with only 2 is going to be quite different. 3 or 4, I think, would be the best play count. The symbols, for some of our players, it was hard to wrap your head around the symbols, because you've got these tokens. For example, when you're domesticating these foxes, a curly tail is something maybe that you're looking for to show that they're more friendly. So this purple symbol has a little diamond inside with the curly tail. And if you look on the card, there's a diamond here that's curly, but all of the tokens themselves are round, and the background is the same as the little shape on the inside. So I think what we're trying to do here is to use the different shapes and the drawings on the shapes to make it easier to distinguish between them, even if you're colorblind. But the fact that the pictures on the dice match the shape, but not the symbol itself, which, I mean, if you've got half a symbol, that might be hard to do too. But you see, so there's a diamond for those curly tails. There's a diamond shape inside this circle, but the piece itself is circular. You can see the diamond here and the color. So you're kind of going by the color more, but I know these shapes on the dice were confusing for some of the, like, why is that a diamond? Why is, it was confusing for our players. The other thing though, and I think this is more important maybe because you can get used to the symbols, and it wasn't everyone who was quite confused by the link between the colors and the symbols and what it all meant. So we had some confusion there, but it wasn't too bad. You've got this great big rule book, and it is a big, thick rule book. Now, it does include the solo rules and how everything works. There's great big pictures inside. And as I said, there's factual information about the scientific experiments that were done. But boy, it would have been nice if there were a glossary with all of the symbols. There isn't really, we did find ourselves looking through that rule book trying to find things, and they were hard to find. The index didn't quite give us enough information for what we were looking for. And it would have been nice if there were just some, like, one page at the end that had every single symbol and what it meant. That might have made it easier for the players who were a bit confused about the diamonds versus the circles and the stars on the wild cards. But the rule book wasn't organized in a way that made it easy for us as players to your mileage might vary, but it was hard for us to track things down. That being said, this is a fantastic dice drafting game. If you like dice drafting, this is, I mean, in recent years, this would be my favorite dice drafting game. We're talking here about a combination of dice drafting and engine building with a theme and components that just all come together in a way that's even scientifically accurate and feels like you're kind of generating these random pups with traits that they're inheriting from their parents. So we really had a great time playing this game, and honestly, I can't wait to play it again. It's going from this table over to my game table so I can play it with the kids tonight when they come home from work. So Pandasaurus Games has created a great one here. I will include some information about where to find the Fox experiment in the show notes below this video. But if you have any questions or comments, you can, of course, leave them in the comment section below this video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. The previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.